Right, so we've got this really cool little boat that we need to sell. Hate to part with it, but we've got to that point in our life. We've had an extraordinary amount of fun with it. It was built primarily as a swimming platform and sort of a light salvage boat, which is a bit of a hobby. And it's best thought of as an unfinished project boat. So to get it to the right sort of buyer, we want to make sure the person gets good value for their money and gets satisfaction out of it, understands what they've bought. So we'll just go over some of the reasons why it was built the way it was. When we conceived of it, we were concerned about how the public would receive it. Now, that concern was not an issue at all. For some reason, this boat gets tremendous public interest. People are fascinated with it. So that turned out to be an unexpected bit of enjoyment from it. We've actually been stopped in live lanes of traffic, people wanting to buy it. So it's kind of a unique, eye-catching boat. As I say, the problem is when you build something like this over time, as soon as it gets usable, you want to go out and enjoy it. So a lot of details never got done. There's things that need to be done. Just to point some of them out, there's issues like trim on the windshield frame. This should have been covered, things like that. This is a little louver to let fresh air in, and that was never completely finished up. So this sort of stuff needs to be closed in to make that completely watertight. I've got my list here because there's a lot of things I want to be clear about. I wouldn't advise this boat for a first-time owner, boat owner. It needs somebody with some boating experience and some mechanical knowledge, because, as I say, there's things that need to be tinkered with, so you need to have a bit of a design skill and mechanical knowledge to do things on your own. It's actually a late 1960s or early 1970s Starcraft Falcon. That's what it was. And of course we've added this cabin. We stuck with the color that the boat had when we got it, and we believe that's as close to the original color as we can get. So the point of the heavy-duty cabin, because we're swimming, you get cold, you want to get warm, so the idea was to have a good solid flat roof that we could climb up on and stretch out and get warmed up in the sun. Of course, after that, you want to get out of the sun. You want to be able to spend the whole day out in the water. You don't want to worry about rain, you don't want to worry about getting burnt by the sun. So that was the idea of that. We made it as low a profile as possible for head clearance. We took our guide from a car. How much head clearance you seem to have in a car. You only bump your head once getting in and out of the car, you never do it again. It's the same sort of thing here. You'll bump your head once, you won't do it again. The glass, we wanted the glass. We don't like the plastic windshields. They get scratched and they go dull over time. We had planned to use this boat for at least 10 years, perhaps closer to 20 was the original plan. So this is all automotive marine double layer safety glass, and it was installed by a professional. Of course, the framework and stuff, that nonsense was done by me, but a professional cut and installed all the glass. These doors, they need some sort of little safety, quick release safety closure. They're fine when you're just putting around, but if you're on a high-speed run and the boat's up on a bit of an angle and there's vibration, these will gradually work their way open, and they'll slide back like that. That's kind of annoying. So we never got around to putting a fastener on there. So that's the sort of little job that needs to be finished up. This framework is all 2x2 inch. It's 3/16 wall aluminum, and again, all professionally welded by a highly skilled welder. A gentleman did this in town. It's just beautiful workmanship in terms of that. It is, of course, heavier than it needed to be, but as I say, we had some visions of doing some light salvage work, and there were reasons why we wanted to go very, very strong. In the design of the cabin, we left provisions for an escape or observation hatch. So this was planned to be a panel that would flip back, and you could stand up and look out if you were trying to navigate through shallow water or something like that. That never got done. So there's another example of the sorts of jobs that never got finished. But the The space is made in the frame there, so that's ready to be done when somebody ever decides to get around to it. The anchor is another issue. Because we're out boating in Georgian Bay off Collingwood, it's a lot of shale and large rock. So we found that a mushroom anchor was the best choice for us. It never seemed to get stuck. And if it did get stuck, it wasn't that hard to dislodge. So with an enclosed cabin, how do you deploy and recover that anchor? So we ended up making this big extravagant apparatus, and along with the mushroom anchor we also used the maximum length of chain we could get away with and still have the anchor be able to deploy itself. So when you release the rope inside, the anchor is heavy enough to draw the chain out of this tube. The tube was run down low because we were trying to keep the center of gravity down. Of course, this cabin raises the center of gravity, so that's an issue that the boat operator needs to be aware of. There's 5 lubrication points. If ever you're using the anchor and it doesn't deploy easily, it means it's time for it to be lubricated. So there's, I don't know if you can get in here or not, it doesn't matter, the person will be able to see it. There's a small oiling hole on both sides, this side, and that runs the oil down into a bronze bushing. Same on the other side. So there's 2 points there that you can lubricate. That helps that pulley to run smooth. And then if we come to the back, here's something we didn't foresee. This is plastic water pipe. We used that so that the chain would slide easily. Each year in the cold it shrinks a bit, and it doesn't really recover. So at some point they're going to have to take that off and move it back. So that was an unexpected occurrence with that. So it was run down along the water line to keep the center of gravity as low as we could. The chain comes to about here somewhere, where it changes to rope, and it goes through this block of pulleys. They're completely enclosed to make sure the rope can never come out of there. And again, there's some lubrication points here. There's one here, so if it's not running smooth, you just give that a little poke of grease. Down here, there's one here. It's much like a chainsaw bar. Like that, little poke of grease. And there, one there. So you probably won't need to do that now for a season. Where did we get to? Yeah, we'll cross that page off anyways. Did you want to take a break there? You're right. Okay. The other reason that apparatus in the front was so strong, of course, the normal process, if your anchor gets stuck, what you generally do is move all your weight to the front of the boat, your passengers or whatever you can. You move that weight to the front of the boat, crank up your anchor as tight as you can, and then you move to the back of the boat, and that buoyancy will usually dislodge the anchor. So that was another reason why that was built so strong, to ensure that if the anchor was jammed, you could dislodge it. And again, if you're not in open waters like Georgian Bay, where you're exposed to extremely open wind conditions, you could dispense with that chain and get rid of, I don't remember what it weighs, a good 10 pounds at least anyways. So you could just go with straight rope, and that would simplify that. Rivets. It's an old StarCraft. We have to talk about rivets. They do come loose and need to be replaced. Some people like to try to seal them with a caulking of some sort. It never really works. It was a job we had intended to do last spring, but with the weather so terrible, we didn't even uncover the boat. So here's we've purchased the rivets. Anybody who's ever used them before, they're solid. That's what they look like. I believe that's a 3/16 shaft. So what you do if you're changing them, you drill in with a drill bit, either that 3/16 size or slightly smaller. You just drill in about the depth of the head. It's not much. Then when the drill stops, just tilt the drill and that head pops right off. Poke the old one out, put your new one in, and this is a little bit backwards, but you would put this against the head of the rivet up through the hull, and then your assistant inside would just tap that over. You wouldn't, my understanding is you don't want to go crazy. It doesn't take a lot. See how that mushroomed out? I don't know if you can see that. That rivet in the sun there opened up, and that's probably enough to, a little bit more than that maybe. If you overdo it, they will leak again. So apparently you just do a number of light impacts. You don't need a lot, and it will seal. And in fact, we used some of these when we first got the hull. It had a little bit of pitting at the back, so I didn't like that. So the ones that were the pitting that I didn't like the look of, I just drilled right through, put those rivets in, tapped them over. They sealed up perfect. Never been a problem. So, in order to see which rivets are loose, we were going to paint it a couple years ago, and we thought, you know what, why paint it? I don't know if you can see, some of the rivets, the paint is separated. And that seems to be an indication of which ones are loose. So rather than paint it and hide those, we left it that way, thinking we were going to do that job last summer and didn't get around to it. But anyway, so that's an issue you need to be aware of. If the boat is at anchor, the bilge pump will come on about somewhere between 90 and 120 minutes. It'll come on for about a minute and a half, 2 minutes to drain that. So there is definitely normal leakage there. If you're running the boat at high speed, it leaks quite a bit faster. So it's an issue you are going to want to deal with. And apparently, in the research about the rivets, apparently there's a small stainless steel nut and bolt designed specifically to replace the rivets. So if you don't like messing around with a hammer, apparently you can purchase these small stainless nuts and bolts. They have a little tiny rubber seal on them or something, and you can replace them that way. It's a bit simple. It's worth mentioning, if you've never worked with aluminum before, or never drill something above you without a full face shield. It's worth me saying it because it's an easy thing to do. Those filings, they will get in your eyes. You can't get them out with a magnet the way you can steel filings. You will end up in hospital getting, they hurt. They really hurt. I've done it twice. So now I always use a full face shield. When you get out from drilling underneath, shake off your clothing because it'll get in your eyes. You do not want that to happen. While we're at it, we used to laugh. We'd bring the boat home and notice it was dripping. And what that was, of course, water that had leaked in was leaking back out through some of the loose rivets. So we came up with a brilliant idea. We thought it was brilliant. Other people may not think so. We put a, we found the lowest spot. If you can see under here or not. Can we see that, dear? People can see that. What that is a stainless steel machine bolt, machine screw, with a stainless washer and a rubber seal. So from inside, there's a wing nut. So as soon as we would get home, we loosen off that wing nut, let that drop. By the next morning, that hull will be bone dry. So it just drips out of there overnight, and it's done. So that's what that little drain is. And it's been a surprisingly effective solution for simplifying this, putting the boat away. Okay, we're done that page. Okay, this engine. We've put 2 seasons on it. It was in storage for 12 years when we bought it, so the carbs were rebuilt and a new water pump installed. I was never totally happy. It idles rough. I know it's a 2-stroke. We had a 4-stroke on it before, a smaller one. It idles a bit rough for me, so I don't think it's set up quite right. And the marine mechanic who did the carburetor rebuild was more than eager to get it out and run it and see for himself what was going on. But the issue wasn't big enough for us to worry about it. We were just out on the bay having too much fun to bother stopping to try and do that. So that never really got looked after. So it's never stalled. It always starts easy. It's never stalled, but it sounds rough when it's idling. So we don't like that. I had hoped to have it running today, but I don't have gas, and we've got such a long agenda here. I'll try and start it up another time so you can have a view of that. And you can run it. If you come to look at it seriously, we'll get it running. The other issue with the engine, I'm not totally happy about. On 4 or 5 occasions, we had an unexplained alarm go off on the control box, and those alarms are for either oil level, or heat. So when the alarm went off, we immediately shut it down, checked the oil level, it was fine, started it up, ran fine, waters were flowing fine, so we never knew quite what caused that. And so over the 2 seasons that we used it, it happened maybe 4 or 5 times. And the only pattern we can recognize is if it's going to happen, it happens somewhere in the initial warm-up. So you'll launch the boat, start it up, putt out of the harbor nice and easy, and then on that initial throttle up, that's when that occasional alarm would go off. And every time it's happened, we've done the same thing, shut it down immediately, check the fluid levels, check to see that the water was flowing. And we can't see why it's doing that. So that's an issue that I want to be clear about, because if it's a boat you're going to buy, I don't want you to have any surprises. I want you to enjoy it and know what it is you're buying. So that's an issue that a person would want to deal with. And we have crossed the bay a couple times running at full throttle for 35 minutes and no alarms go off. So I don't know what the issue is. It's something to do with the warm-up cycle. We've got 3 fuel tanks for it. We normally use the 2 small ones, one each side here, and they just slide in there. We only take that big one with us if it's an all-day outing. We're going a long way, so that doesn't get used too often. The swimming ladder, because again it's a small boat, and so when the ladder is stored, turbulence can sometimes grab that and pull that down. So we always have a rope and we tie it off so that doesn't occur. You also need to have it roped off when you're trailering the boat, because as you're going over bumps, that darn thing will come out. So you always want that tied off unless you're swimming. These here, peculiar looking things, they were to assist getting in and out of the boat when you're swimming, and also to we would run a line back and forth, hang towels and bathing suits and stuff like that on there. So that's why those are there. This thing. Because we've raised the center of gravity of the boat, again it's a small hull, we've put a fairly substantial cabin on it. It's fine when you've got somebody in the boat, yourself and maybe another passenger. Never felt threatened by the stability of it. But when we were out swimming one time, a large boat went by and set up a series of waves, and with nobody in the boat, it looked like it could capsize. We didn't like the look of that. So we came up with this device here, and it seems to make quite a difference. If we're swimming and the boat is at anchor unattended, that's the only time it's an issue. When the boat is empty and unattended, we just simply slide that down, like that. Just let it dangle like that. And it provides a surprising amount of stability, and that made us feel a lot better about that issue. If you don't intend to, if you're not going to use it to swim too much, or if it's going to be a boat you're fishing from or something like that, you could dispense with that entirely. That's a judgment call somebody would have to make on their own. All right, let's go in and have a look at this fuse panel needs some sort of a cover. We just had cardboard taped on there. That's kind of silly. I took it off so you can see what it is. It's all very heavy-duty wiring. It's all ironically, you caught me. These 2 wires are not. But all the other black wires that run out through the boat to the various issues, they're all done with high-quality HPN rubber-insulated cord. And all the connections are soldered terminal connections. So all the wiring's been done very heavy-duty. So that's kind of cool to have that. We've got these silly 12-volt outlets all over the place. The seat.
Paul, can I stop for a
Sure.
second?
Yeah, we'll take a break. Right, we were talking about the seats. To adjust them, it's kind of forward a bit because I'm a pretty small guy. To adjust the seats, it's pretty simple. There's just 4 screws that hold this base cabinet down. There's 4 clamps like that. You just undo those screws, slide the whole thing to whatever position is comfortable for you, and screw it back down again. So that the seats are easily adjusted that way. We had 2 seats in here, but we found that for changing in and out of bathing suits, stuff like that, the boat would seem to be more usable without the other seat. So if we took the other seat out, you'll get that if it'll come with the boat. If you want to put that back in, you can. But we tended to find it a little more usable without it. That's the seat. There's 4 bilge pumps in here, and it's a little bit bizarre why. We wanted one front and back because, of course, when the boat's at anchor, the water settles to the front. When the boat's underway, the water settles to the back. So we wanted to be able to bail either way. Also, I had stumbled on a couple of big pumps. Take a look, show them back there down underneath. So there's, it's kind of ridiculous. These white pumps, there's one here and there's one up the front. They're kind of ridiculous. You do not need those extra pumps in here. So that's the sort of thing. It's a bit of a funny project. Those are things you could take out and get rid of. The controls for the pumps are up here. That's just the running off the float level switches right there. And if you want the pump to run a pump manually, just go up. And they all come on. Like that. Horn, right up there. These gauges. Again, we got carried away. We're a little bit silly. This is one of the old water pressure style speedometers. The highest speed that we noted with this engine was about 23 miles an hour. Not a big deal, but in a boat this small, it seems really fast, so that's kind of lots of fun. That's your depth thing, that works. RPM, that works. Vacuum, that never got hooked up. That was for a different project. The voltage is hooked up, amperage is hooked up. This is just an old Clark Equipment hour clock that somebody had given us. It's quite old. It was still in its new package. It ran 23 hours and gave up. So we don't know what the problem there is. And again, more of these crazy 12-volt outlets. There's 2 propellers go with the boat. The one that's on there now is the less aggressive one. So it's good for rough water and high winds. The other propeller is a little more aggressive, and if you're in sheltered waters, you could use that one, and you might get a little more top end out of it. The battery, we ended up putting it, because I often use the boat myself, so you've only got one passenger. It was good to be able to move the battery around to the other side to trim the boat, or back and forward, depending on where you wanted to trim it. So that's why the battery is on such a long cable. Again, that's the sort of thing a person can reinterpret for themselves, whatever they want to do. The windshield wiper. This is one of these marine wipers I didn't know about, but apparently they're well known to be notoriously slow. I doubt that would even, in the cold, would even go. But in the summer when it's warm and the windshield is wet and the engine's running, so the voltage is up a bit, it's actually quite effective. I'm just trying to think which is the which switch it is. Anyway, so that's the wiper. It does work. It's not too impressive, but it does work. The boat, we never got around to fitting it out with flotation. I have to mention it because that's a safety issue that you've got to decide on yourself. There's lots of room in the sides to bank out with foam. There's a lot of room under the floor that you could bank out with foam. So those are, again, that's the sort of thing that makes me say it's an unfinished boat project. You need to be aware of that if you think it's the kind of boat that would be fun to have. The trailer tires they're maybe 3-4 years old. I doubt there's 100 miles on them, so they look brand new. They're in great condition. Shut it off for a second. We'll go outside and I'll explain the covers, the boat covers. So we'll have a look at the covers we have for it. Come around this way here. This is the framework for the winter cover. The way it works is these 2 rails, they just temporarily bolt on the gunnels of the boat. and that exposes these pins up, and these hoops just sit on those pins. And then you take the tarp, spread it all out over the boat, and fasten it with like a whole bag full of spring-loaded clamps. So you clamp her all down every possible spot, and it's never been an issue. Because of the shape, it sheds the snow really well. So it's very seldom that you have to come out and pull any snow off it. This is what we use in the summertime for the summer cover. We kept it covered all the time because we had to park it underneath the pine tree, the pine needles. So this just goes on the roof. Put that about center, and then there's a smaller tarp which we'll throw in there, and you just spread it over that, and it tents over that little wooden frame. The reason for that is this is not marine plywood. This is just standard plywood. So if it has a tarp laying on it with water trapped underneath it flat, that wouldn't be good for it. It would start to delaminate. So we always put the tarp on, make sure it's tented like that, and then any moisture that's underneath it just dries away. So that's how that's done there. So we have had just an extraordinary amount of fun with this boat. We hate to part with it, but that sort of time in our life has come. A final caution: the cabin, we notice, creates an artificial sense of security. It makes you feel indestructible. You're out there and the waves can break over the bow and the windshield just clears the water, so you think you're indestructible. It's a small boat. So anybody who buys it has to be very much aware. You've got to use that vessel within its capabilities. We would rather see it go to more inland lakes like cottage country, something like that, rather than out here on the bay where it's much more vulnerable. So that's it. Best wishes. Thanks for sitting through that.